All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're stepping into a deeply immersive, totally mythic space, a realm defined by grand tragedy, creeping decay, and ultimately profound philosophical transformation. We're going to explore the core source material of the uncanny diatribe. Now, this is a grim, dark Gothic fable, and it leans incredibly heavily into Nietzschean philosophy. But this isn't just a story about some fallen empire. It's actually a super profound exploration of destruction, acting as the absolute prerequisite for creation. So, dim the lights and prepare your mind, because we are journeying into a world where the rot of the old world is literally the only fertile soil for a terrifying new becoming. Okay, let's dive into this by confronting the chilling, chthonic monologue that basically sets our entire narrative in motion. These are the words of the Gold Demon. This entity speaks with a cold wind straight from the abyss, directly challenging the rulers of the old world. Notice the exact phrasing here: ego-driven hubris and calculated devastation. The entity isn't apologizing for the destruction of the world, it's straight up claiming responsibility for it, treating it as a necessary, almost clinical correction to an empire that had just grown completely stagnant. And that brings us perfectly to Section 1, the Gold Demon's Prophecy. To really understand this calculated devastation, we have to first understand its architect. The Gold Demon, who is also known as the puppeteer of ruin, stands with this ruthless, calculating grace right amidst the decaying, moss-covered monuments of old, proud civilizations. Imagine the gold thread in his vestments, shimmering almost like a creeping infection over the ruins. He delivers a counterfeit prophecy meant to entirely dismantle the illusions of the old world, breathing what the source calls green truths of bitterness. Now, normally we associate the color green with vibrant life, right? Nature, growth. But here, the fable brilliantly recontextualizes it. The green of this world is the sickly, iridescent hue of a creeping infection. The demon is essentially teaching that this rot isn't a tragedy. It's actually the fertile soil required to feed the fires of a much grander, more terrifying becoming. Without the rot, there is no growth. Moving on to Section 2, where we explore a deeply complex cosmic duality, the jester and the spirit of negation. So here, we contrast the two halves of this wild cosmic entity. On one side, you have the vibrant jester, the alchemical spirit of becoming. He represents fluid nature, this whimsical, creative friction, and an uncontainable life force. But, and this is a big but, to force the universe out of stagnation, he has to put on the mask of the Gold Demon, the spirit of negation. That vibrant green is replaced by a heavy, purple priestly motley and a sickly gold. The whimsical creator literally becomes the ruthless annihilator. The intense friction between these two states is exactly what drives the universe forward. Which leads us to Section 3, tracking this ultimate descent, tragedy, into absolute zero. What's absolutely fascinating here is how the source material redefines a scientific concept. Absolute zero, in this fable, isn't a temperature. It's the ultimate entropy of stillness. It's the literal silence of non-existence. The Gold Demon actively pushes the corrupted rulers out of their sun-drenched courts and straight down into the chthonic abyss. We're talking about a weaponized tragedy. Because when the fluid nature of the jester no longer sparks the fires of creation, reality is reduced to a stagnant, frozen void, a blank canvas that has entirely forgotten the divine cosmic clown. It's total existential ruin. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds chronologically towards that stillness. We start at the dawn, right in the sun-drenched courts of the old empires, which are just full of reckless hubris. Then comes the fall, where the demon orchestrates this weaponized tragedy, violently pushing the sovereign into the abyss. This initiates a millennium of dark, thousand-year hibernation underground. And ultimately, if left unchecked, this timeline stretches to the end of time, the complete silence of non-existence, where the entire universe settles into a frozen, unmoving void. But here is the huge philosophical twist. Section 4, Ego Annihilation as a Dark Catalyst. You see, this harrowing descent into the dark isn't just some cosmic punishment for the hubris of the old empires. Not at all. It serves a highly specific spiritual purpose, which is achieved through total ego annihilation. And it is an agonizing process. Down in the silent, suffocating dark, the individual soul undergoes a brutal, involuntary stripping. Every crown, every single title, Every historical memory is violently melted away. The spirit is permanently scarred by the absence of the sunlit world. Yet, this intense stripping is totally required so that only a pure, dormant spark remains in the absolute dark, completely untainted by past illusions. Think of this philosophical engine as having 4 distinct gears. It kicks off with step 1, the ego-driven hubris of the rulers. That triggers step 2, the gold demon's response, which is calculated devastation. This inevitably leads to step 3, total ego annihilation, which finally sets the stage for the ultimate goal, step 4, spiritual rebirth. The old identity absolutely must be completely destroyed for a new, sovereign spirit to be born. To really illustrate this journey, Section 5 introduces the dark parables, apocalyptic visions. So the crucial point is that these 7 parables are divided into 2 distinct buckets. On one hand, we have visions of solitude, which really focus on the tragedy of that dormant, isolated spark trapped in the void. On the other hand, we have visions of nihilistic prophecy, which focus on the active, violent destruction of the world's illusions. Let's break down both of these categories. First up, the parables of solitude. The silent scepter shows a solitary figure sitting on a throne of dust, perfectly representing that ultimate entropy of stillness. Then, the pale motley features a lonely traveler down in the subterranean depths wearing these desaturated twilight colors, fully embodying ego annihilation. The hibernating soul describes the spirit trapped in the suffocating dark, basically just waiting for a kinetic catalyst in a realm of absolute agonizing isolation. And finally, absolute zero is the ultimate blank canvas of reality, completely devoid of life. These parables really hammer home the sheer isolation of the abyss. Next, we dive into the parables of prophecy. The echoing tomb warns of a desolate landscape where ancient, mythic Volsung blood drips into barren soil, acting as that kinetic catalyst I mentioned earlier. The purifying ash foretells a huge wave of calculated devastation. It's a dark, purifying fire that violently exposes the fragile illusions of civilization, reducing every proud monument to ruin. And the final mirror shows the 2 cosmic halves standing face to face at the very end of time, reflecting the absolute zero of the beginning. It's a moment where the dark fire violently cleanses the entire cosmos. But listen, the fable doesn't just end in pure nihilism. Section 6, the free spirit and ultimate awakening. We really have to ask ourselves this dramatic question. Is absolute zero truly the end? I mean, when all the titles have melted away and reality is just a stagnant void, is that the final word of the cosmos? Well, the source material suggests no way. The stagnant void isn't the end. It's actually the perfectly cleared foundation for something entirely unprecedented. To truly get this rebirth, we have to look at 2 totally opposing philosophical paths presented in the text. First, we have Wagnerian redemption. This is represented by the parable of the echoing tomb. It's this tragic clinging to a ruined past, which creates a Faustian loop of eternal mourning over ancient, mythic Volsung blood. It's sorrowful, and frankly, it's stuck. But on the flip side, we have the Nietzschean free spirit. This path outright rejects mourning. It embraces the oath of the Willinar, fully accepting the destruction of the past as the only way to forge absolute, self-determined sovereignty and achieve ultimate rebirth. This concept is literally encapsulated in this quote from the final mirror parable. The destructive malice of negation is finally accepted as the only fertile soil capable of supporting a spiritual rebirth. The oath of the Wilner requires the individual to stop fearing the rot. Instead, they have to recognize that the bitter desire to tear down old illusions is the exact energy needed to transcend them. The destruction is a feature, folks, not a bug. And this brilliantly illustrates the central thesis of the entire fable, the cosmic coin. The vibrant jester and the gold demon are absolutely not enemies. They are 2 necessary sides of the exact same coin. You just cannot have the uncontainable life force without the agonizing annihilation. The fertile rot of the old world is what nourishes the new. Embracing this harsh truth is what finally allows that dormant spark in the absolute dark to ignite into a sovereign free spirit. Which brings us to the ultimate question posed by the uncanny diatribe. When you're faced with the creeping infection and the total collapse of the world you know, how will you respond? Are you going to be trapped in a Faustian loop, desperately clinging to the fading embers of a ruined empire? Or will you embrace the purifying fire, accepting the absolute zero of ego annihilation to finally become a sovereign free spirit? The choice, it seems, lies within the rot itself. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and until next time, keep exploring the dark corners of the ideas that shape us.